this thing on? Now, I know I say this every single time, but sorry for taking so long. I haven't completely disappeared. If you follow me over on TikTok or Instagram, you'll see that I'm actually quite frequently posting over there, but they're mostly miniature projects that aren't really YouTube friendly or have very tight deadlines. However, we have something big this time, a proper project. Computex is around the corner, or by the time I publish this video, may have already happened, and I have a rig going over to the Thermaltake booth. Let's go have a look at it. So this is the CTE C750 Air, and it is huge. But I'm not here to review it. You've got plenty other tech channels to do that. So no, I'm here to absolutely rip it apart as you would expect. So what are we going to be doing with this gargantuan case? Because it is absolutely massive. And that means there's lots of room for activities. So I'm thinking I want to preserve some of the interesting layout choices that this case has in its stock form, namely the rotated motherboard tray and the fact that we've got radiator support on front and the back. So I'm thinking we can really play with some symmetry here. We can have the motherboard in the center, the I/O comes out of the top as in the stock case. However, we will not be doing it stock. No, we will make a whole new I/O panel. We will also make a new motherboard tray. We'll throw away most of this stuff over here. We will keep the radiator brackets, but actually they're in a really good spot. And making your own ones, I'm just going to reinvent the wheel here. These are perfectly good. So I'm going to put a 420mm radiator in the front, and I'm going to put another one in the back. This being such a big case, we may as well go dual loops. One of the things, obviously, that we're going to want to see are distro plates, right? But we can't keep boring distro plates. Can't just do flat ones. Everyone can do flat distro plates. I want to do something a little bit different. Now, if you recall, when I was working at BitTech, I did a build for G-Skill, which had a crystalline distro plate. But I think we can go one better. So why not make it just much thicker? Something like a 56mm thick distro plate that runs in the middle. It's going to run like almost like a crystalline cloud. Having the distro plate there means that I can have all the tubes run sort of parallel from the different components, and it should look really neat. So obviously this is all going to be going. We're going to incorporate a little distro plate down here somewhere. And then since we've got two loops, we're going to need some pump adapters. So I'm going to put a distro over here and then a distro over here. I've never really worked with really thick aluminium in a case mod before. We're going to have a 20mm thick top panel that should slot into the default points. And really, we just want to make it as neat as possible whilst looking fairly stock on the outside, but completely different on the inside. How are we going to do that? Simple, with a ridiculous amount of acrylic. So for the central distro plate, we've got this, which is 30mm cell cast acrylic. That should do beautifully. We've got obviously two pieces, one for the top, one for the bottom, 20mm, and this is going to be faced down to 18 and other thicknesses as required. We've also got some frosted acrylic, which is going to be going for lighting panels and accent pieces, plus a whole lot of aluminium that hasn't quite arrived yet, so we'll save that for a future video. I'm quite excited to get stuck into all this because I've got everything for the acrylic parts toolpath now, so why don't we just get on with it? It's the next day and I made quite a bit of progress last night on these acrylic bits. So the first ones that we were working on were these pump distro plates. So we've got the pump goes on this side facing the front. This then interfaces into the back of the motherboard tray. This was actually quite a bit more challenging to the machine than I first thought, because on this side over here, it's cut away so it's not flat. Normally that's not a problem. However, I put a pocket on the other side of that as well. And that just meant that when you flip it over, there's basically a really large area of unsupported plastic, and it's only 4mm thin there, which means when you pass a tool over it, it chatters and vibrates. We've got this very small one over here. So this is the connector plate. This goes underneath the motherboard tray. And the idea is the front here has 2 ports that go over to the radiators. The back goes back up to the pumps. And then these 2 here are going to be drain valves. Every time I've forgotten to put a drain valve, it's been terrible. So this time I remembered. Now this larger panel is actually a rear panel that goes behind the motherboard tray. And you see I've got this cutout here, which is going to be for the integral cables. So it's the same sort of thing that I did with NSYS. I'm going to have the cables flowing through the motherboard tray, and it's going to be topped with this one. Now speaking of thick plates, I worked on these as well last night. So these are the blanks that are going to become the mid-plate distro plate. And they're huge. I mean, look at the size of one of those. It's 30mm thick. Well, it was 30mm. They're now bang on 28mm. So I'm going to be putting these back on the machine now so that we can do the crystalline pattern, and that's going to be quite exciting. The other thing is that I mentioned earlier, these are a little bit different to the norm. We are not using fittings. There will be no fittings connected to these. Now, why wouldn't I want to use fittings? Surely they're nice and reliable and simple. Well, usually, yes. However, in a plate like these ones, the issue comes with the fact that they're huge. And also, that creates another problem in the fact that because you've got to sink them further down, actually they get quite deep. And some of them, to get them deep enough, because of the slanting slopes and things, basically don't get past the collar. So I'd have had to pull it all the way up and they'd be protruding at different heights and everything would just look really weird. So basically what I've done is I've bored out a 16.2mm bore here, and that's going to be large enough for a 16mm tube. And inside there, I've seated 2 3mm O-rings. Now the cool thing is I basically undercut using a T-slot cutter, and then that allows me to compress them from the inside a bit like a push fitting. Et voila. Now that we have a proper plan, let's get to it. Well, I think it's pretty safe to say that that is a really solid start to this project. So we've got two distro plates over here which go on either side, and they're going to have the pumps in them. And then we've got the Mega Crystal distro. Now, obviously I did one of these before over on BitTech with the G-Skill build, but it is nothing like this. Aside from the fact that this is about 4 times the size of the main one in that, the finish is just so much better. And you can't go particularly fast either. So actually this had a 9-hour machine time for the front side. Now the rear side I left a little bit cloudier on purpose so that we could get a little bit more light going through. But even that took a good 2.5 hours. So either way, it's a very long time to make one of these things. But I do think it looks absolutely fantastic. And it is built like a tank. Of course, one of the interesting things about this build in comparison to the other ones is that actually partway through it's going to be shipped off to Taiwan, where it's going to be exhibited at Computex. And I'm going to be filming some of that because I'm going there myself. So actually, you might get a little sneak peek of this rig in that video. That may come out before or after this one. I'm not entirely sure. It will depend on the editing schedule. Yeah, I'm just really excited. It's going to be good fun, and it feels nice doing another rig for a show again. Hopefully it will make it there in one piece. If anything breaks, luckily I can fix it, so I'm in that position. But fingers crossed it will get there safe and sound. Now, of course, you wouldn't want to miss any of the future updates, so make sure you're following me over on Instagram and my TikTok as well, because actually I post far more regularly on there. In fact, YouTube is the one which is quite difficult for me to upload to regularly because most of my projects aren't really YouTube friendly, and it does make everything take a little bit too long for it to be sensible to do for some of the things that I have to cut on a day-to-day basis. But for things like this, the home is definitely going to be YouTube. I'll be releasing snippets here and there on Instagram and TikTok as well. But the majority of the meaty content and all the really cool camera stuff, that's going to be over here. So until next week, folks, take care, and I'll see you then.